Hey everybody, this is Silverspook, and this is the Silverspook video on House of the Dragon, Warmongers versus Peacemongers, Patriarchs versus Matriarchs, and my review of the HBO series. Now that I've finished watching almost all of it, yeah, just hopefully this stream doesn't get shut down. We're in the middle of a big storm, a storm of swords. We're in the middle of a whirlwind. So hopefully the stream will stay up. But anyways, House of the Dragon. If you haven't seen it, I do recommend it. Anybody who liked Game of Thrones is definitely. Just start with the media, entertainment. In terms of like how good it is, definitely it feels like the original series. Like it feels like if you like, I know Game of Thrones got kind of, I don't know where people are with that now. Towards the end of the original Game of Thrones series, it kind of the last season or two was not the best. So it kind of was not well remembered, and when it just started picking up, bigger mainstream popularity, and people kind of got turned off to it because many reasons, but there was just some, it kind of got super Hollywoodized, and all the money people kind of stepped in, and it kind of lost what it was in the seasons like 1 through the majority of the show. So House of the Dragon, it feels like the original Game of Thrones, and in all the good ways. So I definitely liked it a lot. Definitely worth watching, and everybody's talking about it. So we're gonna talk about it, and we're talking about patriarchy and matriarchy. But yeah, it. Obviously you have Emma Darcy is now well known as that's how he tells me, a non-binary icon. There's a lot of sapphic events in this show, especially in the second season. There's it gets very interesting. Actually, a lot of the show is her, Emma Darcy, and in the show she is Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra is the lead Targaryen dragon rider that was named and is vying for the throne. Is contesting the giant seat made out of a whole heap of melted together swords sitting in a throne room, and her rival is not the girl on the left in the green. Is not her. She is the mother of the King Aegon, who is currently on the seat, but it's being contested. It's being fought over, and she represents the High Towers, which is I haven't read all the books, so I'm not up on all of the lore. These are all based on George R.R. Martin's, obviously the Song of Ice and Fire books, and then House of the Dragon takes its inspiration from like a kind of like history of the Targaryens. Is it Fire and Blood? There's like an actual. It's kind of like the Silmarillion, and it's it kind of goes deeper into the history of. Silmarillion goes way deep, maybe too deep, into the Tolkien Middle Earth universe, but like Fire and Blood goes into the history of the Targaryens, and so they made a show that's set like 170, almost 200 years before the events of Game of Thrones, and it kind of like deals like more like the Targaryens are like because the Game of Thrones is like many different houses, right? You have the Starks, the Sigils, the Wolf. They have their own, their family, saying their house words, right? Then there's the Lannisters. I believe the Lannister always pays his debts. There's a direct reference to that in Neofeud. Neofeud, my games are direct. The Neofeud series certainly is like directly, partially inspired by Game of Thrones world. I was watching. It was basically like binge watching Blade Runner and like the Matrix over and over again during the day or in the night, and then during the day I was like, holiday night or date night was Game of Thrones. For a lot of the early to mid 20 teens, and so that was and so it's kind of like fusing the cyberpunk science fictional, which has a lot of feudal characteristics to it. It has a lot of machinations toward power to maintain power. It's like a big part of, and they deal on kind of like these like because Game of Thrones deals on a kind of grand. It deals with kingdom. It deals with like interpersonal that play like the romances, the falling outs of the family dynamics of family. It's Rhaenyra and her like these two characters on the screen. Those are their childhood friends, right? They grew up together, but they like Rhaenyra on the right, like was like in the first scene of the first episode of House of Dragon. Rhaenyra is like they're lying down in a glen somewhere with like trees and flowers around, and Rhaenyra is like lying down with her head in Alicent, that's on the left. Rhaenyra's head is in her lap, and they're like talking about what would you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do? And she's like, what I would like to do is I would love to go on adventures and fight in great battles and ride dragons and see the world and do swordplay. But she's a woman, obviously, in a patriarchy and in a man's world, and we're the role of women is not that, right? And then her friend Alicent is like, well, our duty is to the kingdom, and we must be good wives and mothers, and we must bear children and bear heirs. That's our responsibility, right? So it's Alicent on the left. So this is kind of like, and so that's a sorry, my internet over here is on. Anyway, so that is a family dynamic because they're not exact. They're not. I think they're not blood sisters, but they grew up together in the same household, right? They grew up together in the same household, and so they, for all intents and purposes, they were raised. They played. They ate together. They spent most of their time together. I mean, as a family would. Their father is they're raised under the same roof. I mean, obviously it's a palace. It's the Red Keep in King's Landing, a huge palatial building. But they are siblings for all intents and purposes. So there's a family dynamic to the whole thing, right? So which makes it all of the Game of Thrones is like when it I think Emma Darcy says when it sings to her or to them, it's when it really works, and it's in the family dynamics that it I think works the best because anybody can relate to that. I mean dysfunctional family, or more functional family, sibling rivalry, parents frustrated with the children. Season 1, that's a lot of it, right? Is King, Paddy Cassidy's King Viserys being constantly frustrated with his children and going, "I am your father." He comes in. It's a big like dysfunctional family Thanksgiving every time. It's like, "I am your father. Stop this quibbling in my household." And he's trying to get his daughter to like listen to him. I can totally see like how like the writers are like some like some older boomer age guys trying to get their daughters to like not completely bankrupt them, or like to kind of get them to do what they want, and they're kind of having trouble with that. Like, that's definitely like a lot of the Viserys character. He's like, I know you want to go to that concert. I know you want to go with that boy, but he has no future. He's or I know you want to do whatever you want to do, but we have to fulfill our responsibilities. And it's kind of like, but also like, here, I want to give you what you need, right? I'm gonna give you what you want. And he's like a spoiling dad. I mean, he's the Viserys king, the king of season 1. He's the king for most season 1. He's like a doting boomer dad with while the children are growing up, things are at peace and there's lots of prosperity. But then he also has lots of people that are kind of they're not necessarily like spoiled, but they're given a lot of free reign, and they they don't listen. And then they get older and they want to do what they want to do, and they're not really thinking of the kingdom. When Rhaenyra is older, or younger, that's like a lot of it. It's like, can't you just listen to me and get married to this young eligible bachelor from the house of Lannister? This will be great for the kingdom. It will solidify our. I have to marry you up because of the feudal system. It's like our governmental responsibilities, right, to maintain stability in the kingdom, and to it's kind of like in the season. It's almost like in season 2, you can see like what Viserys was trying to do in season 1. Everybody's like, you're just an annoying old man trying to tell us who to have sex with and who to marry and who not, and you're just why do you keep telling us to do things? Stop making us do this and that, and and like, nobody really gets what he's doing, right? He's kind of like he's a historian, and he's a kind of a reclusive nerd who likes to construct. Since I'm talking about that, let me put that up on screen. He likes to construct like giant, massive miniatures, like massive, like miniature models of the Westeros world, right? So like, this is the giant. I'm trying to get a good image of that. Is this gonna be good? So so Viserys is like he is like the medieval feudal fantasy world train nerd. He's like spends all of his hours counting the 7,625 different types and scales of building. He's on the spectrum, guaranteed, and he's definitely like into his models. Like, if he was alive today, he would be like the dungeon master somewhere that's like painting, spending 76 hours of the 24-hour day painting miniatures of Gandalf, and playing Warhammer 40K, like reading through 60 trillion pages of lore in the Warhammer 40K or the Cyberpunk 2077 universe. He'd be over there like nerding out all day long, right? He'd be like, hello, and then like info dump about some random topic. He's definitely like that kind of character. He's not completely. He is adept at. He understands the politics of the present. So there's some characters that are more. They don't understand they don't understand human interaction that much at all, right? They're much more neurodivergent in a way that like negates them like interacting and engaging with other people. But he's definitely like, he's not like a conqueror. He's not a war king. He's not presided over war, right? And his father oversaw a long time of peace. I think it was Jaehaerys. So his character is also what's up to Grant and next to Holly. But anyways, so Jaehaerys' character is he's a make love not war kind of guy. People, if he was born in the 1950s, his conservative, um, MacArthurite, Douglas General MacArthurite family members would call him a hippie, a pinko, probably, because he's not very manly in that traditional sense. Like, and the casting was right as well. I mean, he's not the strongest jawed guy. He's kind of like, for a lot of it, he looks. I mean, he's very like, he has a neckbeard. He's like a neckbeard looking guy, and he likes to play with his toys. He likes to play with his Dungeons and Dragons models, and he read about history, right? And he definitely, towards the end, he gets really sick, and it's unfortunate, right? And but some people don't respect him very much because of that. Some people think that he's too weak. At one point, he says like, I wonder what it would be like to be tested, to have to fight in an actual war, right? To be put to the test, to be in a wartime, right? To wield the sword and to wield the armies, right? And then somebody says like, he's like, perhaps I would have been a great warrior. I mean, it's kind of like, it's like modern like armchair open like the armchair keyboard generals, that like talking about the wars on Twitter and the historical wars and present wars and who's winning and what. And it's like there is a desire in like, and this is part of, I'm going to come to this in Patriarchy, right? There is a desire, I mean, this is why lots of men and like masculine leaning people like war games, video games, watching wars happen, fantasizing about war, making war, right? Playing 4X games, playing strategy games, watching movies about war, watching World War II movies, watching historical war, watching Game of Thrones even, because parts of that is, I mean, a lot of it does deal with war. Not season 1, but, and he kind of like, what if I was a wartime, what if I was a war king? What if I was a conqueror? Would I be a good conqueror, right? Because he's never been in that, right? And somebody says, so I forgot who says it, but it's like, many have entered into war, into the furnace, into the cauldron, and the fire of battle, but many regret like having entered it at all, right? And many perished, and many reveal, many come out of that feeling only worse about themselves, right? And what they've done to the world. And so he says, I guess you're probably right. So that's actually like an interesting dynamic, which is that like, I mean, obviously I titled this Patriarchs and versus Matriarchs, right? But like Viserys' character is very like not patriarchal in the certainly the traditional Western sense, his brother, right, that's played by Matt Smith. His brother played by Matt Smith in House of the Dragon, right? He is he is much more like, he is the fighter. I mean, he's kind of unhinged. He's not quite all there in his head. I mean, this actor has played many serial killers and like horrific entities. He's played the literal homicidal AI overlord, Skynet, in Terminator Genesis. He's also played Charles Manson, right, well-known serial killer, famously devoid of empathy, who literally said, I don't care, I simply cannot. I am like biologically incapable of caring about other people. I when I kill people, it's like when I see people get hurt, it's like someone poking a sandwich with a knife. I don't feel anything, right? And this guy has played Matt Smith has played he has played he has played Charles Manson, right? And he does a really good job of portraying this kind of like, I love violence for violence sake. He's kind of like, he's like boyish in that he doesn't really understand the politics. He doesn't like the politics. What his brother, right, King Viserys, is his brother King Viserys was given the throne, and he was, he was, not that he was denied it, but he feels like sometimes he feels like maybe he was in line for it, right? And he feels a little bit snubbed by that. Well, it's kind of like his brother was older than him, so that was part of it. So it's like, but his brother has also like sent him away because Daemon, and his name is literally Demon, basically. His name, he's like literally like evil, fiery, badness doer. His name is Daemon. All the Targaryens have like lots of A's and E's, and it gets confusing. And all, it's like, I'm gonna make like a Christmas Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer Night Before Christmas for all the dragons, right? Because it's like on Vhagar and Rhaegar and Donner and Dixon, on Vogon and Drogon, and on Rhaegar and Draeger and Vogon and Drogon, on Magar and Tagar and Nogon and Fogon. It's like, anyway, that's just George R. R. Martin. That, because I think George R. R. Martin, his self-insert character is Viserys, right? Because he's just somebody who obsesses over European history and then writes stories about that, right? And then he has to come up with all kind of names. So it's kind of like in the Game of Thrones world, the names all kind of names from a particular region or family or house or lineage, they all kind of rhyme, right? But then it gets really confusing when you have like 25 characters from a house. It's like, is that Rhaenyra, Rhaerys, Nerys, Rarity? Oh wait, no, that's a My Little Pony. Wrong princesses. It can get confusing. Anyway, King Viserys on the left is the brother of Daemon on the right, and Daemon, he in the season 1 starts out with him like calling up the king's watch, bringing the King's Watch to basically clean the city. He's gonna do a Batman, but like with much more blood and guts being spilled, right? Daemon is like, we have to clean the city because there's a big event. There's a big the official kingdom games, with the jousting and everything. It's going to be held there, and there will be visitors from all the houses from across the kingdom, nobility, and the ladies and the gentlemen, the lords and the ladies will all be there. And he's like, we don't want anybody to get mugged or attacked in the street, and there's too much crime in the street. In part because Viserys, right? He's like the kinder, gentler Pinko Kami spirit. not Kami, but he's not type A man who wants to sit on the throne of Chinese skulls. He's not like a conqueror type. He's not a very violent. He doesn't seek out, and he doesn't really like violence very much. It's actually a scene where he has to where is that scene? He has to attack. He has to kill this deer, the buck, right? Or the white. They're looking for the white heart. They don't. This is a giant. It would be the best catch. They don't get that one. They get a large, hoofed animal, right? And this is the only time you actually see Viserys do anything. Actually, it's the only time he actually kills anything or fight. It really attacks anything, like physically. And he like has a hard time. Like the buck is being held there, like by two. Like there's two groups of men on either side with the ropes around the buck's head, and he has to, they're holding it in place for him. It's not able to move at all, and he has to just take this royal spear, and he has to just stab. So he has to, put down the buck, and that will be the royal seasonal hunt, right? It's like a ceremonial thing, but he's like having a hard time just doing that, right? but it's kind of like, you know, and like that scene is interesting because it kind of shows you like it further illustrates that he really doesn't, he hasn't done it. I mean, he's not weak in a political sense, right? Because he does command when he needs to command, but he doesn't really like violence. He doesn't really like killing. He doesn't really. I mean, he likes to think about and read about the histories, right? He's a history nerd, right? I mean, he's like a nerd. He's like an academic, right? He doesn't really like, you know, like thinking about, maybe even sometimes fantasizing about being a great warrior, maybe, right, in a video game, as you have to say on Twitch so you don't violate the TOS. He thinks about doing a violence in a video game, or, you know, on a tabletop, on a giant, you know, this like Ridley Scott. The reality is, you know what this is, right? This is all the Hollywood. This is all because, you know, all movies. I mean, it's really it's kind of self-insert for writers and artists and you know, and lots of, they're not the most patriarchal, you know, traditional male and also women figures that make movies and make art and make drama and make characters. I mean, I speak from myself, from experience as well. And a lot of the time, what you're doing is you're like look at picture Ridley Scott. Right? What are they doing? You're spending hours and hours making props, right? You spend like 20 hours on a prop. You're sitting there in a chair for 4 hours painting your face. You're not going to war. I mean, even Matt Smith, right? Matt Smith. I mean, you know, he's playing this wild guy, but I mean, most of what you're doing as an actor, right? You're more like Viserys. You know, you're thinking about, how do I get this look right? Is this scar in exactly the right place? Is this armor look sufficiently damaged to convey the war weathered condition I'm supposed to be in right now, right? What is the lighting like, right? Is the makeup on my face right? I mean, even if it looks like war. You know, you're supposed to look like and act like you're in a war, but you're thinking about, you got to think of what you're doing most of the time is thinking about your looks, right? Because this is a Hollywood show, because this is theater, right? This is art. It's not war, it's art, right? So, you know, and part of making convincing art is you have to spend a lot of time thinking about other people's lives, right? Which is, you know, making art and entertainment, and much of what the modern world does. I mean, it's actually in mostly peacetime, is thinking about people whose lives were far more violent than yours, and then constructing extremely detailed little models of that, right? Like Ridley Scott making the Blade Runner set, you know, placing every little dot of light on a building, right? Like some Japanese Tokyo constructor for you know, anime or cyberpunk 3D Final Fantasy thing, right? Or Blade Runner, right? Making the Tyrell building, right? Carving that thing out, you know, putting the greeblings, which is basically like to on a miniature, to make a miniature, like all the indents and you know octagonal little unknown turret. Is that a turret? Is that a semiconductor? What is that, right? So most of what Hollywood is doing is spending hours and hours, right, slowly going myopic and blind and by over using your retinal your eye muscles to get your retina to see these tiny little grooves that symbolize something on a rocket ship or in a model of, you know, a feudal kingdom, right? So that when the camera is zooming through that, dollying through that, which is what you're doing when you're making Star Wars, when you're making Blade Runner, when you're making when you're making miniatures for games, tabletop games, right? So when you painting the brushstrokes on a magic card, I mean, I know Wizards of the Coast unfortunately using AI too much now, but you know, I mean, when you're painting, it's part of it is because all the nerds in peacetime are like, what the hell are we supposed to do, right? If we're not painting the brushstrokes and making the art, making the models, making the costumes, if you're gonna AI all of that, you know, what are we supposed to be doing with our lives? Which is that's a question of the ages. But anyways, so like, but that so all those little details is what brings to life the Millennium Falcon, right? Make the Star Destroyer looks like a massive, huge ship that's miles and miles long, because of these little details that some group of hundreds of peacetime Viserys nerds have to place on the thing. The actor, makeup people, all this, all this work that goes into making these shows and movies and games, and I know because I work on these. Certainly the games, personally. I spent a lot of time yesterday just like finding semicolons and parentheses. I spent like half of this morning trying to place a princess in Neofeud 2 in the exact correct position, and it has a nanite disrupting card that's gonna make this door and then make that scene convincing, and like she has words she has to say to her father in the Neofeud 2. Slight sidebar for Neofeud. Here, Neofeud is a directly game of, like, I think I still have the Steam description here. It literally says a dystopic cyberpunk adventure game in the vein of Blade Runner with an overlay of Game of Thrones like political intrigue. So there you go. But like, I literally have to have, this is like Neofeud, obviously my game, but and it has much to do. It is a Game of Thrones world crossed with a cyberpunk world in that's like one of the central thrusts of the game and one of the central interests in the game. That makes Neofeud like a different world from other world. I mean, it's not the Shadowrun Cyberpunk 27. It's like Shadowrun is like just fantasy, and then Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk 2077 is like a 80s retro future cyberpunk. And you've got your Dungeons and Dragons, your Fallout. 50s post-apocalyptic world, super slapstick, dark satirical comedy, alternate future. But Neofeud is like it has the Game of Thrones like political intrigue and the feudal labels, titling, and trappings, right, overlaid. Like, so there are worker / peasants, right? There's worker / serfs / peons / peasants. There's king / CEOs, right? There's viscounts of marketing, right? There's knights, aka the police, right? So under a modern capitalist, a very dark late stage capitalist system. But the world is fused together. But a lot of making, it's kind of like, what is to draw out how is the feudal era different from the modern democratic capitalist era? How is it the same? Is there a difference? What are they? Are they only superficial? And is the inequality that has always existed still there? Why is it still there? How can it be changed? Where does the power flow from? Does it flow from is the power in the government, or is it in the money? Does the money make the government, or does it flow from the gun? Does the gun, but the money and the government, but the money and the seat of the chair and the machinations control the guns, or do the guns control the government? Anyway, so those are the questions that like Game of Thrones deals with those as well, and your Cyberpunk deals with those, and that's why there's a lot of similarities between those. And that's why I kind of those are the kind of things that I was drawing from when I was making Neofeud and watching Game of Thrones. And then obviously I've interviewed William Gibson personally, so Cyberpunk, I was already deep in the Cyberpunk world. But the Game of Thrones is really it's a show that it's a show that definitely is a cultural phenomenon. It's one of the most, I think it was, and may still be, the most pirated show of all time, certainly in the West. And it's a show that is, it was pirated because it was on HBO in part, but everybody really loved it. It was a phenomenon. Like a lot of millennials, and a lot millennials in the teens, in the early teens, like people were talking in like, are you team Daenerys or team that? I mean, it was it's kind of like the Harry Potter unfortunately has not so good connotations because of people who have worked on that and are not so good people. And then you also have, but you have like then you had Twilight, and then but Game of Thrones was like a really for certain people it was like, I remember I was in like a Team Fortress 2 server, like shooting minigun bullets at as a heavy, and everyone like renamed themselves as Game of Thrones characters. I remember being like, I forgot, it was like Stark, someone else was Lannister. Everyone was like changing their names into Game of Thrones characters, and it would just be like quoting whatever happened in the. It was like when the episodes were coming out every week, everyone was just like quoting and being like, which team are you on? And it was a real cultural phenomenon for a lot of people. I mean, I don't know how big exactly it was, but I mean, I know like these were not even people that were in the fantasy game. They were in like a totally different game, but everyone was talking about it the whole time. And anyways, that's enough about that random Silver Spook backstory. Anyways, so back to Game of Thrones. I forgot where I came from. Okay, so I feel like that's one thing. So I think that's actually an interesting thing to think about, which is that the people that create the show, I feel like, I can't tell you this, but I feel like a lot of the show creators, certainly the writers and like set designer people, or like a show is being made in a yes, the United States is been at war for almost all its existence except for less than a decade of its 200 plus years of existence. But at the same time, most of the people in the United States, I mean, they're not all fighting, swinging swords, shooting, pulling triggers, right? Most of the actual American population is not in a war. They're working at a 7-Eleven, or they're working behind a computer, sitting behind a computer somewhere, hitting the keyboard, right? Maybe they're fixing a car, maybe they're going from meeting to meeting, right? Sitting in meetings, right? It's kind of like what Viserys is doing it's in the sense that he is a peacetime ruler, and his job is mostly having discussions and trying to and going to meetings, going from meetings to meetings to meetings to meetings, right? Meetings with lords, meetings with ladies. It's like going to this meeting about where are we at the looking at PowerPoint, and here we are at our quarterly numbers. Here's a training on how to let's have a sexual harassment training video to make sure that nobody comes and sues us. Okay, here is the latest design for the new iPhone, or the new marketing scheme for the Walmart. But I mean, that's all happening in a bunch of rooms, with people sitting in rooms, going to meetings, and then going to other meetings. Now, some of this is not necessarily, certainly in the United States and in the West. I mean, some of this is like not necessary. It's as David Graeber once called, the BS jobs. Which begs other questions that I'm not going to get to right now. Like, why are you doing them? But it's kind of like, but I mean, just in the sense of like what people are doing in the day to day, today is most like what Viserys is doing. And season 2 of Game of Thrones is different. The whole of Westeros is at war. Like inside Westeros, people are at war, right? There's danger around every corner. Like, I guess the U.S. One of the U.S. candidates for president. Technically, there was an attempt, but it's not Iraq, yet, not yet anyway. And so it's still closer to what most people's existences are like, and I mean, in the modern, certainly modern first world. Anyway, let's get back to that. So, but I guess the thing with the Viserys is like he doesn't seek out war, right? He sees this and he's not the most patriarchal sort of character, right? He is a man, and he gets the throne because he is a man, because he does have a cousin, Princess Rhaenys. Yeah, that's what it is. I can never remember. There's so many R's. Uh, it's like Rhaenys, Rhaenyra, Rhaera, Nerys, Viserys, Ravis, Raven. Oh wait, no, that's the one-eyed guy that can like go into animals. Anyways, Rhaenys Targaryen is the cousin, right? Who is you know, she's the cousin of the King Viserys, right? That guy. And Rhaenys is, they say many people regard that in the beginning of season 1, the narrator introduces that it's like the old king was dying. I think it was Jaehaerys. The old king was dying, and he had to choose. And there was a possibility of having a woman on the Iron Throne. A woman would be the ruler, right? But he chose, and she was. They say actually, Rhaenys's temperament and skills, and just who she was, what would have made her a better ruler, right? A better monarch, a better queen of the kingdom, right? But because basically it's like it's like Game of the House of the Dragon, right? It just starts out with that, right? It just starts out with, because most of Westeros would not accept, or at least not willingly and peacefully accept, a woman ruler. The dying king, but she was actually closer. I think she was closer in line, and she was better suited. She would have been a better ruler. But because the kingdom was patriarchal, basically, they were misogynist. They said, we will not kneel to a woman. Or that was the feeling that nobody could like how do you know that there's a patriarch? And nobody comes out and nobody does a survey and goes, how many of you are patriarchal? That wouldn't even work, right? Because people say, of course I'm not. But I don't want no woman boss, right? I don't want my woman making more money than me. But it's just understood, right? And it's not false either. Right, it's not historically in the Europe in the time, and definitely not now. That like many people wouldn't have accepted it. I mean, there's not no societies that have had women rulers, like in Hawaii and in Native American societies and many other ones. There has been more or less. I mean, it's always a struggle. It's never fully gone. But like there have been like women were in charge in Hawaii in many different times, and like a lot of Native American cultures are heavily matriarchal. Or women have more power in the society just in general. So but anyway, so coming back to Game of House of the Dragon, so that the fact that because people would not kneel to a woman, just on average, nobles, commoners, lords, just in general, not any specific house, just like in the whole, throughout all of Westeros, right? People would say, I am not going to kneel to a woman. I will not accept a woman in charge of this kingdom, right? From Lannister to Tully, just not everybody. Like some people will be like, this is great and it's a good progress, and she is better suited to the throne because of her temperament, her knowledge. This other guy, Viserys. I mean, this is the truth. I mean, it is the truth. It's like, I mean, statistically, women are 3 times more qualified. More women more qualified for jobs get routinely passed up for less qualified mediocre guys. It's just right. That's like. Certainly in places like the U.S. and the West, right? That's just what happens, and they get paid like statistically, empirically, like 30% or more, less, 30% less, or even less than that sometimes than their male counterparts in the same science, tech, engineering job, managerial job, whatever it is, right? Even Donald Trump said that himself. It's a man's world, so I got to choose a woman for my architect because she's actually got to be good at her job. She's got to be many times better than at her job at building buildings. And so I chose a woman specifically. And and it's not false. I mean, the patriarchy is not gone, right? But even now, so that was a consideration, and yeah, and I mean, he like Viserys, right? He's not. I'm trying to get another picture. He wasn't. He's not a. He wasn't like a bad guy, right? But he was kind of like very introverted, and he's not. He's not a warlike. He's not a war-seeking, right, sort of person. But he's also, he before he became king, he was, he didn't study. He wasn't as seasoned and knowledgeable about governing, right? And Princess Rhaenys she would have been the better, like, if there were no patriarchy, if there were no misogyny, if there were no inequality in the genders, and not even just inequality, but like this expectation, just this the if it wouldn't have caused such disruption because of men, especially men, the women are mostly like happy to have a queen on the throne, right? I mean, if you actually ask the women, like in not in view of tons of men, but when the women talk to each other, they're like, we should have one of ours. We should have a woman on a throne at some point. This is right. This is only fair, and it would help, right? And the truth is, it would actually help, right? And I feel like this is like a part of the point of the House of the Dragon. And this woman in particular is more qualified than Viserys, but it could cause the men to get upset, angry, and they could rise up and attack and try to. It could incite a war, or it could incite strife and struggle. It would cause dissent. It would cause violence or problems inside the kingdom. Right? People might not bow if people don't give their fealty. Right? If people don't accept the ruler, that alone can begin to cause it can encourage usurpers. It can encourage people say, we have this woman ruler cannot stand. It is, a woman cannot rule. Women cannot rule. We have to replace her with a man. Join me, fellow men and women who see the truth, who see the Jordan Petersonian truth, right? Which is that women's place is to serve and the man's place is to rule and to dominate and to wear the pants and to make more money and to have, all the cash on the Wall Street and fight the great wars to save us, not for my personal glory, prestige, status, and wealth as a man, but for the good of all of us. A man must rule, right? And the thing is, like, that's not historically or currently false. Certainly in the Western world. In the U.S., it's definitely not false. One of Trump's attacks, of course, is that, well, we can't have a woman in that. A woman has never been in the seat of the White House. I mean, not to say like putting in a woman who's going to do patriarchy and have a token is a good thing. No, but there hasn't been a woman because patriarchy still exists. Certainly in the U.S. in the West. So that is a factor, right? Now, of course, in the United States, it's not really, they wouldn't accept many people would not accept a black president either, because the racism still in the U.S. and the West as well. But it's that's like having a woman, because there is a woman as a vice president, but having a woman as a president of the United States or a black person that's not going to cause a uprising and a civil war necessarily, right? In the current United States, but it does so it's a different situation. But it's not really it's not a war of gender, right? But it is, but it's mostly, a lot of it is just the desire of men to hold on to power that they believe they deserve and need to have and just want because they want it. is and masculine masculine male identifying people seeking to preserve that, and some women seeking to preserve that for their own personal benefit. I mean, that is still impacts us today. It impacts the world today, right? Because part of that is why there are so much wars. I mean, it's not false. That's why there are wars, because as it's shown, like, the men are more likely to, for their own personal status, prestige, and wealth, and foregoing the risks to the society, to their own families, to the people around them, to the common folk, right? To the average people, to the soldiers, they're going to get killed for their own personal benefit. For the guys who just want to get into some violence because, overloaded testosterone, plus, a toxic cocktail of war propaganda, glory-seeking boredom, and not thinking, and just the tendency to not think, to privilege, fear, anger, rage, territoriality, and all these kind of things, and that it's a toxic soup that, like, tends to be in the masculine side that leads, toxic masculinity, and then that leads into war and conflict, needless war and violence and conflict that, when it starts, is not easily controlled, which is, major part. It's a major point in the House of the Dragon series, certainly, right? Arguably in parts of Game of Thrones, but in House of the Dragon, certainly season 1 and 2, that's like a central aspect. Is like how the male desires for violence because I just want to see blood and guts, and it's just like, there's an instinct towards that. That's, Daemon is one of the where is he? I lost him. Daemon is one of, like, he kind of like embodies that, right? He's like the traditional masculine guy, kind of not fully thinking about everything that he's doing, just itching, to get into some war games, like getting into some shooting, getting into something, right? Coming back to what I said earlier, he goes into the King's Landing, and he brings the guard, right? Like, so that's like the king. I think it's a King's Guard, the gold cloaks. He brings them into the town, and he basically orders them. He hunts down anybody who is like, and he's not really doing anything kind of like justice. He's basically just like seeking out people who are kind of accused. It's clear that whether they actually committed a crime or not, he doesn't really care that much, right? He just, you are a thief, and he orders everyone to kind of take that person's hand, cut the hand off. That's your punishment for being a thief. You are accused of sexual assault, right? And or grape, you can't say that word for the algorithms, but you are accused of sexual crimes. Okay, we'll cut off your privates, right, in public, right? Everybody's bleeding out. Oh my God! And he collects all the severed limbs, severed genitals, severed hands, and he's like, "You accused of murder, or you're a murderer." It's like worse than Judge Dredd even. He just like walks through the streets and just like, and he cuts his head off, and he has like a 2-horse cart full of all the severed limbs of all of these criminals, right? I mean, of course, there are certainly going to be some people that have done wrong in the town, but he's just like brutally going around just to make a show. He's like, now nobody will commit any crimes, you see? But so he's using the situation, which is that, like, his brother, right? His more peaceful brother, right? Viserys, his more peaceful brother is his brother, like, always errs on the side of not doing violence, right? Like, he barely wants to even poke a deer, right? And it's not quite, he wouldn't even harm a fly, but it's almost, he wouldn't really want to harm a fly, right? In order to, he does have to intimidate sometimes with his throne, right? But he gets everybody right. He has to put on his cloak. He gets on his throne. He gets his giant sword. He gets all of his guard around him, right? He does know how to do it. He's not that like useless, right? Because there's other people who get on the throne who are more useless than that. But arguably more useless. But he doesn't really want to do any violence, right? He doesn't really want to do it. Um, but because of that, you know, there is, people start taking advantage. So some of the townsfolk, they're like, well, I mean, I can get away with whatever I want. Maybe I'll get away with a little bit more. Maybe I'll do a little thieving, or I'll see what happens, right? And there's other places like uh, in the seas, right? There's the Triarchy at sea, and this um, in the first scene, it's led by this kind of creepy guy with a mask that feeds people the crabs. He nails them stakes them down in the sand on a beach, and lets all the crabs come and lets all the crabs come and like eat them alive. And this guy, the sea snake, he is also he's a black Valyrian, not Targaryen, but he's a black person. People from this place called Valyria in this world, right, which is now destroyed. They all tend to have they have like silvery white hair, right? And you find out in the House of the Dragon there are black Valyrians, so they have like silvery white hair, but they're like obviously they're very dark of skin, and they also have dreadlocks. What is his name? Corlys. Yeah, Lord Corlys is the sea snake. He like manages the oceans, right? But he's having problems with Viserys because he's the king of the tides. What is his name? The Lord of the Tides. He like rules the seas, right? And he helps to police the seas to stop. And he's kind of like he's like Ansar Allah, He's what the U.S. wish it was in the Red Sea. He controls the sea lanes, which are needed, and which is what, because a lot of the wealth of King's Landing and Westeros depends on this trade, right? And so he has to manage that, right? He's like one of the most powerful forces in the sea, in the oceans, and so his navy and his military and seafaring skills, right, are like unmatched. But then there's challenges from the free cities. I believe it's like what the hell? I can't remember all their names. Essos. There's Bravos. There's another area that's far away from what that's not. It's like across the oceans of Westeros, and they are challenging Westeros now, like, as an entire kingdom, right? They're challenging those sea lanes. And the Triarchy is what they're called. The challenge the sea lanes, and he has to resist. He has to stop them from taking, from encroaching on their ocean territory. If they do get cut off, that could be because later on you find out when they get cut off, it causes economic problems. It's kind of like it's just like Yemen, cutting off a particular places, right? And then suddenly economic strife happens in a place that has 1 year left to survive, right? And even the United States and Europe, right, because of like over 10% of all the world's traffic is being stopped, right? Even if, and this actually plays out in season 2. The population of like it's not the people in the King's Landing. It's not the king on the throne and his people that are cutting. That is why there's no bread, there's no lamb. People are like, "Where's the meat? We have no meat." There's like the common folk. They're like, where we have like there's low supplies. People are upset, right? People are trying to find a picture of that. I'm not gonna find one. People are like, we hear that the royalty, you're dining on lambs, and they're out in the street. They're like, where is our food? Where is our food? And they're like, and the knights, right? The king, the police, also known as knights, also known as the King's Guard, right? They have to put down the upset commoners who are dealing with this increased poverty, lack of resources, right? I mean, the United States and the West are looking a lot like this right now. They often are, but but they just get more and more hundreds of billions of dollars for police and failed military adventures for patriarchal billionaire. neocon glory seekers. But anyways, so the police, so the people are getting more and more upset, and somebody says a line that's it's a very good, because it's not actually the king is being cut off, right, by when the House of the Dragon splits, right, and there's two different people. There are two separate rulers that are vying increasingly militarily for the throne, right? And when the House of the Dragon does split, the one half that's cast out into Dragonstone, which is another. It's not in the King's Landing is like, it'd be like the New York. It's like the London. It's like the central city, right? In which the throne itself is, right? It's the biggest city in this whole country, right? And but it has like 1 million people, I forgot exactly how many. It's a whole lot of people. It's like the biggest, most populous city. That's many mouths to feed, right? And so then when the House of Dragon splits, is actually the dragons, the Rhaenyra, who is in Dragonstone, has her Corlys, right? This guy, the Sea Snake, has him blockade, like Ansar Allah, like Yemen, like what the U.S. tries to do to Cuba, right, and many other countries, right? Blockade all the resources coming in to starve them out, right? Using famine in the colonial era. This is like the number one weapon is like blockading sea within the U.S. And the British and French, right? The British ruled the world on the barrel of a gun. A lot of that was just starving out places, right, or trying to cut off places from trade, economic development. To this very day, that's still what they tried to do. That's why they put all the money in the military is this kind of thing, right? And so cutting off not obviously not succeeding at it all the time, but cutting off the seaport access is at one point starving out the rival, right? So Lord Corlys uses his sea power to basically blockade, so that no goods are getting in, and people are getting hungrier and hungrier and angrier and angrier, right? And they're going like, and then suddenly, the people see their leaders, and they don't see the external, right? The person cutting off, right, necessarily as the one doing it. Somebody says like, it's not me, it's Rhaenyra, it's our rival that is causing the lack of food and the lack of resources. And then one of the advisors responds, that doesn't matter to the common people. You're the ruler in King's Landing. They see you as the one failing to feed them, right? And this is part of the attempts of color revolution and these kinds of things, right? And to overthrow democracy, that certain people, certain entities have engaged in time and again, but it is true. And historically they have done it to, this has happened in European history, right? Cutting but then the people do eventually, right? Especially and these people, they don't have access to literacy. They're not literate people. They're kept illiterate. They don't understand. They don't have have access to an education system at all, right? So all they know, right? When a king comes to power, all they just, oh, we get free bread. Oh, who's that? Oh, you the king. Oh, they don't have history. Right? Certainly this is this era. Arguably, we're still in that era of mass illiteracy. Only 56% of the United States can read above a 6th grade level. So hasn't progressed very far, actually. And those people who can read, many of them have incorrect information in their history books and in their news media that's telling them what the world is actually like, and it's false, right? So you know what that's like, right? You live in a place that's fighting wars that are not the will of and don't benefit the mass common folk, right? You ever lived in the West? Anyway, so you ever been in one of these places where people are sending off lots of people to war, common people to war, for reasons that they don't even fully understand and are not going to benefit them? You ever? It's certainly not them, particularly when they get shot and die. So the common folk they don't understand. But what they see is that their leader is not giving them the food that they need. They understand that, and it doesn't really matter. And then their stories are being spread, right? There's actually interesting. There's actually a half. She was in Devs. Sonoya Mizuno is in House of the Dragon, right? And her character is she is a common. She was like abused by her father and like suffered horribly in somewhere outside of Westeros. Came by ship to Westeros, and she like worked her way up. She sold her body, like she was, she was a lady of the night and did whatever she had to do to survive as a common person. And she her character is like she knows she built a small she bought her own house with the money that she made working in brothels and stuff, right, and doing whatever she had to do to survive to make money, and then and built some small name for herself. And she knew the common folk she knows the common folk and what the goings on in the city, in the King's Landing, very well, right? And so she is a player in that sense, right? She has knowledge, she deals in information, and in the ear to the street, right? So she, and then so her character is like, she knows what is happening and how to incite if you want to get people to go towards rebellion because of the lack of food. So she starts working with the rival, right, outside the king, and it's like, we can start rumors, and so they start fanning the flames and going, so she has people sent into the city to the right places in the right taverns to go, the king is dining on lamb and meat, and he's having lavish parties every night, right? And you are all here starving. You are all here starving. Your children are sick, like the guy on the right. He's like building weapons, right? He's building weapons he's like a weapons he's a weapons arms dealer for the Empire. No, he's building weapons, and to make this for this huge war that has started in season 2, right? But his child is like sickly because his child is starving and sickly and could pass away because his kid is not getting access to enough food, right? They have the same fish every night, and at one point the queen the queen regent gets like slapped in the face by a commoner with a fish, and they call her queen of the fishes, right, or the fish queen. And her son is the fish king, because that's all they have is some fish, and it's not very much left, right? So like, they want oranges, they want apples, they want lamb, they want beef, they want goat, they want other grains, they want, and they don't have enough of it. So then and so they're all fighting over food, right? And so and the people are upset, and they see, and the rumors are spread, and the people start saying, so there's a rebellion starts getting incited inside the kingdom by the common folk, because of their failures to provide for the needs of the masses, to provide the bread. So now the bread and the lamb and the meat will be taken, right? And by force. And like, there's a scene where it's clear that, like, yes, they have knights, they have the King's Guard, right, and they have soldiers, right? Let's see if I can find that. Right, they have soldiers, right? But it doesn't matter like how many soldiers and knights that you have, right? If enough of the commoners, there's a million of them. There's a million common folk. If the common people, right? And I think one of I forgot her name, Sonoya Mizuno's character. One of her lines is like, you nobles, you rulers only have enough power as the common folk allow you to take, which is it's always the case, in fact. And feudalism, colonialism, capitalism, these are thin lies papered over to keep the people, the masses of the people, exploited and asleep and not taking their power back from who they should have taken it from at all times, elections or otherwise. Anyways, So she says like, you only have the power that the common folk allow you to take, right? As like a voice of the common people, right? And she also has to make a choice because there's a war that is happening, and so she has to make a choice ultimately of what she is going to do and who to help, right? And she looks to who is actually going to serve the common people, because obviously they don't really have socialism with Chinese characteristics or European characteristics. They don't really have Marxist Leninism or anarchism, or they're not really at that point. I mean, most people they don't have a lot of things in Westeros or in feudal Europe, a 15th century, 16th century Europe. I forget exactly when Game of Thrones is based upon, the War of the Roses era. But it's like so she has to kind of choose which direction she wants to go in, and she's like, so one of the rulers actually cares for or is trying to showing that they're like trying to do what is best for the common folk, respects and doesn't treats common folk as equals. This actually is interesting because speaking of Hawaii's time, Hawaii's rulers, this is one of our thing in the 1800s. Kalakaua, there was a quote by Kalakaua in the 1800s. He was dressed as a European king. He was the leader in the Kingdom of Hawaii in the 1800s. I'm Native Hawaiian myself. And somebody like there was a point in the history in the 1800s where somebody entered his I forget where it was, but they entered his presence and like knelt down and was like groveling, and he said because he was dressing as a king. Part of the reason why they had to dress in this way was in order to not be colonized. This is during the colonial era, and so gaining parity with the Europeans, who dressed in these kind of clothing. They wore crowns, they had the scepters and these gold and silver badges and these tassels and these hairstyles, even the beard styles, right? And the kind of, so a lot of that was about not trying to be colonized in that time, and to stay independent by showing you were civilized. But somebody and he said, the commenter said, like, I'm not worthy. Is a Hawaiian citizen, right? A Hawaiian citizen coming to the king, and he said, Stan, do not do that. We all must be strong together. We do not, we have to, we all have to work together as one nation. And it was kind of implied. It's also been implied, not just by him. Emma, the mother. Speaking of mother of dragons, the mother of universal healthcare. Also a queen, Queen Emma, right? She actually created the world's first universal healthcare system in Hawaii, in 18. Let's see, where is it? In 1859, right? She created the Hawaii's free healthcare system, right? Let's see, Queen Medical Center. If I can find that. I have threads upon threads upon threads of this, so you probably have heard of this. But yeah, so anyways, but she was technically a queen in Hawaii, right? She was beloved by many people. Speaking of matriarchy, she was the partner of the King Kamehameha the Fourth. Yeah, where's Queen's Hospital? The original hospital. Yeah, here's the original hospital. So like this hospital, it was established by Queen Emma. She went on foot. She attempted to get a bill passed in the Hawaiian legislature in the 1850s. It failed. So she went on foot, right? She went on foot to raise money for to funds to start this hospital, right? It was called It was an inimitable asset to the medical community, the nation's medical history, and most importantly to people who call Hawaii home. The hospital relies on its history and commitment to the vision of its founders to guide the day-to-day operations. Anyway, that's from today. But yeah, here's some of that history here. Yeah, this is some of the original hospital. Yeah, it was also because the people were plagued and people needed healthcare, right? And so she went on foot to raise money to build this hospital, right? And the hospital, right? Well, it was. I mean, this is not really acknowledged, but this was actually it actually was the world's first universal healthcare because Queens Hospital provided healthcare at no charge, right, to the people of Hawaii. And even if you were a visitor to Hawaii, right, even if you're a visitor to Hawaii, basically it's a pittance because you're not paying any taxes, but basically for $1 they would treat you at the hospital. So it was, for all intents and purposes, it was providing for. My point is that, like, under that matriarchy, it was providing for the needs of the people, right? She also started a nursing education center for nurses in Hawaii, basically of her own accord. And and that won her a lot of favor. And to this day, Queen's medical system, even under the U.S. occupation in Hawaii, her hospital system is the largest medical institution in the whole Pacific, of the Pacific Islands. And people across the Pacific, right? So even in people in the other islands in Fiji, Central South Pacific, they get medical help from Queen's medical system, right? Especially if you have like something that's complicated and they can't be done on your island. So, and so what I wanted to get at was that, like, so providing for the needs of the people, right? It's also how the Hawaiians this in our system. This is how you gain actual, what we call mana, or it can also mean political power. It can mean like strength in some way. It means a lot of things, but one of the things that it means like the legitimacy, right? Which doesn't necessarily flow simply from votes cast, right? Votes is one measure, right? But another measure is like what do the people feel for you? Do you care for the needs of the people, right? As a leader of any kind, as a king, as a queen, as a president, as a Congress, right? As the so-called Parliament of Britain. I mean, most of the United States and the European and Western countries with representative democracies, when you survey the surveys of the people, even done by the political leaders, like American citizen surveys by Harvard, show that most of the United States population has an unfavorable view of the current president, the previous president, and the Congress, and all of the Congresses for decades, if not centuries, if not forever, right? Most of the population, with very few exceptions, the only time there was ever actually a positive view of a Western democracy for any extended period of time was during the biggest communist and socialist movements in the U.S., right? And it wasn't really it was basically a response of the capitalist ruling class, right, under Roosevelt, right? And that's what he was the only like 3-term president, right? But it was because he was responding to what the people were demanding because of fear for himself and his wealthy, because he was a wealthy man, right? As a Roosevelt, as a dynastic feudal, shadow feudal power, because his brother was president previously, and they were huge land, corporate, and money owning, right? And then they had huge wealth in their family. The Delanos, the Roosevelts, these are old families in the United States, and like his legitimacy, like there were other leaders in the United States, like the Koch's father. They actually wanted civil war. They wanted to crush the communists and socialists with internal suppression, right? But Roosevelt said, maybe we'll just give them what they want and we'll save the capitalist system, and we'll give them some of what they want for now, and we'll tamp down the discontent in the masses in the Great Depression and the grapes of wrath, right? We will stave off internal revolution and complete systems change by giving enough bread and enough food out there. And it's not to say it's a bad thing to provide for the people. But I mean that is part of the history of the United States, right? And you know, and I mean, I'm speaking to like the common folk and their needs that are not being met in. I'm not trying not to stray too far from this. The common folks' lack of their needs being met is part of what the feudal leaders in Westeros have to contend with, and it becomes a mechanism of political change in season 2 of Game of Thrones. I'm trying not to spoil too much, but I'll just say that, like, let's say like that is a mechanism at some point in the season, so Sonoya Mizuno is actually half Japanese, I believe. She has like a French accent in a lot of the House of the Dragon, which makes sense because France is the one place they did behead their rulers. You know, I mean, they still have many problems today, but they did cut the heads off the royalty, as a friend of ours once, a French friend of ours once said. They cut the heads off the royalty. Voila. Yeah, and so where was I going with that? Yeah, so that's one of the impacts of and this is also why the United States came to Hawaii and illegally occupied our country, because we were doing too much of the other thing that is opposite of the capitalism. Anyways, yeah, so the economic factors are part of that. Coming back to the blockade that's done by the Corliss and the Sea Snake is part of what is causing the loss of control and loss of the political. The thing is, like, the politicians and the ruling class is always, right, even in the US and Europe, they're always surveying to see where the people are at, right? Ultimately, they're mostly not really doing what the people want. I mean, getting elected doesn't really, you can as they say in the East, in the United States, in the West, you can change, or in the US, you can change the parties, but you can't change the policy. In China, you can't change the parties, but you can change the policy. Right? I won't go into it anymore at this point than that. But the ability, the people in charge, they are paying attention to where the people are at, right? Because if things get bad enough for the people, and if they, it's kind of, think of it, it's like a lot of people think that politics is the voting, or like doing the stump speeches, or telling other people to vote for this or that person, right? That's not really where the politics is happening, right? The politics, this is like obviously this is a opinion, man, but it's also the truth, which is that what determined the policies is not, because, like, even going back to Roosevelt, right? The policies of 50 million jobs in the jobs program, the New Deal, right? The new Social Security system, right? The 8-hour workday, the work week, vacation time, all these things, right? All these programs, the taxing 98%, all these changes, right? Those didn't come into place because anybody voted for Roosevelt particularly, right? It's not because they chose that super rich dynastic mansion owning old money leader, right? It's not because they chose the House Roosevelt scion, right? In the same way that it's not, right, ultimately the common folk, it's not because the common folk vote for Reina, it's not because the common folk vote for House Hightower or House Targaryen, right? Or they vote for Rhaena, or they vote for Rhaenyra, or they vote for Alicent and her children, right? The common folk will get what they want eventually, because if they don't get what they need. If they don't get the change, then there will be the end of all of these rulers, right? And that's what got the changes in the 1930s. It was right. It was the masses going, we are going to execute and do full revolution and wipe out all of the wealthy, and we will eat the rich, and we will constitute. We will do what Russia has done. The Red Army will crush you all, and we'll overturn all the wheels and all the tables, and we will have a new game, right? There won't be a Game of Thrones. There won't be a game of White Houses and dollars. We're going to get rid of the capital system, and we're going to get rid of this corrupt political system, and we'll just establish something else. And like maybe we'll screw up the next thing, but you'll be gone. Right? We might have a revolution and we won't get it all right. And none of them are perfect. But all of you that are in charge, you will all be dead and you'll be executed, and your heads will all roll in the street. And that is what, so it wasn't an election, right? And so that in that sense, like, right, like she is right in that the common folk, what is her name? Her character is named Miss Arya. Why? It's a very memorable name. Why did I not know that? Anyways, so Miss Arya, the commoner who now kind of represents a lot of the common folk and has some ability, and she also was formerly promised by Daemon, right? She was going out with Daemon for a bit. Where is he? She was going out with Mr. Daemon, Mr. Matt Smith, the creepiest, Charles Mansoniest Doctor Who that's ever lived. And that was her fault for dating. No, so she and he turns her down. He says he's promised her certain things and then nothing happens. She is promised things by the High Towers, and the High Towers, like, she helps them, and it goes, I will remember this, and then they like burn, or they basically destroy all the wealth that she has built up, all of not the wealth, but like all the standing and all of I think her establishment, or gets either like physically destroyed or she just loses it because the High Tower. So multiple nobles, right? She says, like, I once believed that I could ascend in King's Landing. I could ascend in Westeros, working hard and moving up. Yeah, I thought the United States has the worst social mobility and economic mobility. You can't get ahead in America. Even before the 2020s, it was the worst. It was worse than much of the rest of the world. It's one of the least places of least opportunity, calling itself the land of opportunity. But people falsely believe that and come to the United States for some odd, strange, misbegotten, misinformed reasons, probably global propaganda. Anyways, a global propaganda system stemming from economic, social, political, and technological control. Anyways, so Miss Arya's character is like, I used to believe I could maybe build a better life for myself. And I kept on getting, I was promised things by the nobility, and then yes, you are a commoner, but we will be together, and I will support you, and we will work together. And then she gets thrown away 2 times, and then she's like, I'm done with you, right? And then she meets somebody else, and then there's sapphic lesbian good times. And the matriarchy is fulfilled in the lesbian copulation, and men never have sex again. And 70% of Westeros men can't. 70% of straight Westeros men can't get dates, and they start, the men's rights activists and Elon Musk start a mass movement of men going their own way in Westeros. No, that doesn't happen. That happens in the Westeros of the 2020s. So her character is disenchanted and disillusioned by the believing that she could play part of the game, but it's like, no, commoners, common folk, and the nobility, the common folk, the serfs, the citizens, the workers, and of course the slaves beneath them, definitely, will never be, will only be tricked into a better life by the aristocratic upper wealthy ruling class. Right? That's I mean, that's what's happening in that with her. That's what's happening in her, and that is part of it. So what I will do is I will incite revolution inside of this very unequal and increasingly unequal place, with rulers with all the wealth and all feasting daily. I mean, that doesn't sound like anywhere in the Western world, does it? I mean, there's probably nowhere that's like that. That sounds really strange. It's terrible. Isn't that terrible? And help all these people that are struggling to survive. I will incite revolution inside of the incite rebellion and revolution inside of, not necessarily communist revolution, but I will incite mass turning of the tables, right? Because what is the difference between a revolution, a communist revolution, some other kind of revolution, coup d'état, regime change, civil war? It's a spectrum, really. Ultimately, right? It's like, where does the revolution start and end, right? Where does civil war start and end? Where does war start and end? That's another question in Game of Thrones. That's it's another interesting thing, and it's kind of like, it's already like, people are like, we're not at war yet. No, we are. We are at war. There was a skirmish here. Well, I mean, that's not a full all out war. I mean, the King's Landing, all of King's Landing, and all of our houses are not fully attacking all of their houses, right? And there's no point at which the war really starts, right? This part of the Game of Thrones is good as well, because it's kind of like, you never really see, right? There's no start point to the war. It's just people are upset at each other. It's kind of like the United States right now, right? You don't really see the start of the U.S. Civil War. You just, half of the United States believes that Donald Trump is president. It's still a case, right? The liberals and the conservatives are at each other's throats. There have been, like, I've talked about this in previous streams, like, there have been direct military, not full on shooting, but direct confrontations between Republican states and Republican coalitions and federal Democrat government, federal Democratic controlled government, like Biden's administration itself. And so where does the Civil War in the United States start, right? Where does the war start and end, right? Where does the South China Sea, the U.S. is trying to start the Imperial Corps is trying to start a war in the South China Sea right now, right? Where does that start? Is it when the fishing boat hits the China? Is it when the Filipino boat rams the Chinese fishing boat, or the Chinese fishing boat is acute? Is the Gulf of Tonkin false flag incident the start of the Vietnam War, or is it when the planes from the United States are flying and bombing the villages in Vietnam, right? Where does the war start? Some people will say it ends when it ends when and certainly in the modern era, when an imperialist withdraws. That's often described as the end, like when the U.S. goes home. When the U.S. withdraw, when did the Afghanistan war start? Right? Did it start when the United States started pushing propaganda about the U.S. trained the U.S. trained CIA agent Osama bin Laden? Did X and Y and Z? Did it start when the planes hit the towers? Did it start when the U.S. got there? When did it end? Is it over? Right? Because the U.S. still has over the horizon operations in Afghanistan. So anyway, that's the like, obviously wars can be declared, but in Game of Thrones, like in much of history, the war is never actually like, this is the day to start it. It just, people have rivalries, people have differences. This confluence of a chaotic confluence of individual houses that have spats with each other, like old grudges they want to get out. And the increased tensions are like in the riverlands with the Tullys, and there's like the Brackenwoods and the there's these two families in the riverlands, and they just hated each other for 1,000 years. And now this context of there's a growing rift in the kingdoms. There's discontent, and there's rumors of war, and there's battles that could be happening around, and they take that as an opportunity, like, and men who want to get back and do some violence, right? Like people like the traditional patriarchy man like Daemon, they're like, or just violence seeking, like, I'm just gonna start doing violence. And we have a weather that feels like we're in a time where there's lots of war. Let's go to war. Let's start a battle. Let's start a battle. And there's several guys that all get together in a group, in a toxic masculine round table, kind of like this, right? Not that one, right? Where's the House of the Dragon? With the Dorn guy, what's his name? Cole, yeah. They all the guys, they get together in their war room and they're like, it looks like it is party time. Let's all talk about and scheme how we're gonna start this war. What battle are we gonna go to next, right? And then at a certain point, it gets its own momentum where all of the war seekers, right, which mostly are virtually all men, the war seekers kick all the women out. There's actually several scenes it's almost like hard to watch, man. I feel bad. It must have been hard to be the women in the room. There's like 6 or 7 men that are all like hardcore. They're like I've been training for war. I've been practicing my swords. I've been looking at this map. I've been playing Risk. I've been playing StarCraft. I want to find those resources. I want to get Vespene gas. I want to get minerals and build more ballistas and swords and armor to kill and crush more and more. And all the women, it's almost like it's like 2 guys playing Grand Theft Auto, kicking the woman out of the room, kicking the girlfriend out. Like, it's not for you now. Or it's like the guy playing like some war game, like, get the women out of here, right? And like in both houses, right? In both sides of the rift in the House of Dragons, that has this schism, this chasm between them, right? There are women that are like, they had been, in places of power. And all the men, they get together. I don't care who wins. I want my name in the history books. I want to see battle. I want blood being spilled. And the women are like, maybe we shouldn't, like, our sons, our children are going to all be harmed, right? They're thinking about the future. They're thinking about preserving, right, the children, thinking about their children that they're losing. They're thinking about the future, right? They're not, in this society, they're not trained for war, so they don't really have expertise in it. They don't pick up the sword. They don't learn those ways, so they don't really know ultimately what they're talking about there, because of the way the society is structured, right? In which the men do all the warring and the fighting, blah 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 blah. And once the war starts, it's not even the war is declared. Just things are moving in a direction of war, and the men kick both Rhaenyra and Alicent out of the rooms, and then the war machine takes on its own military industrial screwed up toxic testosterone patriarchal logic, and everybody just starts dying, right? And then it's like eventually it's like, and the dragons are like the nuclear weapons, or like the dragons are like, the heavy explosive artillery. They come out, and when the dragons come out, everybody just starts getting burned. Like 1,000 people get melted into ash and a puddle of steel and bone and smoking meat in a snap of a fingers. 1,000 people are like that's like a double-digit chunk of this one army just gets wiped out. Double-digit percentage just by one dragon, and then the guy is like, "Oh crap! I just watched everybody die." And it's the Dornish guy. His name is Cole from House of the Dragon. He says he is the one who's like he basically has discarded all. He says, "Women, get out of here. Peaceniks, you pinkos, you peaceniks, you anti-war, you ceasefire now, people. Code Pink, get out of here. Get out of the war room. The men, the warring type A men who want to sit on a throne of Chinese skulls and Russian skulls and Arab skulls, the men are in charge now. Get out of here." And then he kicks them all out. They go to war, and like everybody dies. And this is one. And this guy is the this guy who was like the knight who served under. He was the guardsman who was standing guard in front of the princess's room of multiple of both princesses. He's been with all the princesses. This guy is the white cloak, and I don't mean that in the sense of purity. I mean that in the sense of the biological bodily fluid. Anyways, the white cloak in chief. He is not the gamer of thrones. He is the player of dames. Okay, this guy. He has been with all the princesses. he has been, he has he has seen the undergarments, and he has been in the crown, all crowns. I mean, anyway, but then when it comes time, when he starts to move up in the food chain, and suddenly he is in the small council, right? He's the one who ends up like leading the war, right? And he I guess he gets he gets like he gets well, it's kind of like over time he kind of goes from like the pure he just wants to be a good knight and be honorable and be the white cloak is supposed to symbolize purity, because you would never think of tainting the body of the air factory. I mean HEIR air, which is what women's job is, to pump out babies for men to have future legacy under a patriarchal feudal system. And anyway, so the white cloaks are not supposed to engage in any kind of, you're supposed to, supposedly they're supposed to be pure, and they don't have sex with anyone. They have the vows of chastity, blah 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 blah, right? But they're not eunuchs. And then they stand right outside the princesses and the nobles women's doors and guard them. And and then they're not so pure. Anyways, and then eventually, like, he gets burned by his ex-girlfriend Rhaenyra, and she's like, I actually don't want to be with you. And that one's kind of like, it's a little bit like, she did a kind of a, she kind of like, not her fault, but she did kind of like, he was like a soldier, and she did jump his bones technically. She did come at him, and he should have resisted, but if a queen orders you to violate your vow of chastity, I guess it's a little bit can be difficult, right? I don't know what, yeah. So, but it's on one hand, he did violate his vows, but then anyway, so then he gets with the princess, and then later on he's like, I have soiled my cloak. Escape with me to the free cities far away from this kingdom, right? Because he does, he feels like guilt, and he feels like, I have gone against my vows. He's still upset about that. So he like, well, I can correct that by like leaving this entire kingdom, and he also like, he is in love with her at that point, and then it's like, why don't we run away together? And she's like, I can't do that. I have duty to Westeros, right? And then that's part of what happens. That's part of what causes this, him to go down this particular path that he's on. Anyways, it's not her fault, but I mean, part of it is he just eventually just, I want to make war because I can. And I can part of it is like, I can get glory and fame and prestige and use my knightly warring skills, increasing the warfare, right, in the kingdom. And like, they do increase the warfare. He does start, he's the one who leads and starts the big official the battles that are really taking place. He's the one that leads the battles. Like, he's like forget his exact position, but he's like, he's starting the wars, and he's increasing the wars. He's like moving towards the rivals' territory, right? Taking castles, right? And he's bringing dragons with him, and then dragons fight dragons, and then castles get melted. Just countless people die in one fell swoop. It's not really a battle. It's just the dragons come through and they just melt everybody, and everybody's gone, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good your swordplay is. It doesn't matter how much push-ups you did. It doesn't matter like how your mastery of your skill on the horseback. It doesn't matter how many jousts you've won. It doesn't matter, right, how honorable you are. You're just dead, right? I mean, it's like and that's and that's a lot of what war is. Just like, well, welcome to everybody dying now, because when it really comes to it, right, it's like there's like, we're not going to use dragons, and then the dragons come out, right? Because if you put when you push somebody into a corner, I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like pushing Russia into a corner, right? I mean, it's right. It's, I mean, obviously they haven't yet, but I mean, not in the sense of nuclear weapons, but in the sense because that is a danger. The more that that you increase the warfare, and they're not necessarily profit seek because the military industrial complex, but part of that is the you know, but it's certain people are benefiting in terms of power. Certain people are benefiting in terms of their own prestige. They're going to get their names written in history books, right? Some are taking, right? Some are taking profits, right? From the warfare. Although, you know, but they're certainly profiting for their own personal egos, right? The men are, as I said, the men are saying, women, get out here. It's wartime. We're going to play war all day long. We're going to have a 72-hour risk campaign. We're going to have a all weekend StarCraft marathon. We're gonna have like 86 hours of Call of Duty. You know, we're it's wartime. You know, it's wartime now. Let the boys play. You know, let the war boys play. Just like in Mad Max Fury Road. You know, let the war boys. Let us go get ourselves killed, and let us get other people killed. Let us get other people killed. So we can have fun, right? That's basically European history. Anyway. So, okay, it's 116. I should. So I need to get. There's a lot more to talk about. The patriarchy and patriarchs and matriarchs. One of the things that before because there's like infinite ways I can go. I'm currently like almost done with season 2 of this. I haven't really talked about any of the specific actors' performances in depth, but we don't have time for all that. One of the other thing I like about the that I didn't really talk about in season 1, there in almost every single episode, there is a birth of some kind. There's childbirth. There's labor in House of the Dragon, and it is like in most of the scenes with the childbirth. The mother and the child both, the mother and child both die. It's almost always a very horrific scene, and you really see like what is the labor. It's really labor. Like it's a lot of work. I mean, it is a lot of work, and then it's also it's very dangerous. I mean, it's very bloody, and then like, you know, and especially in this time. And this I went in a recent Twitch stream. I went more in depth on this, and I probably won't have time for it. But number one, that's part of the patriarchy, which is that the women's job is simply to pop out heirs. You know, you cook, you clean, you make babies for me, and it's kind of ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You know, it's a ridiculous system. And particularly the European feudal system, which is the Game of Thrones system, which is that when this particular penis goes in this particular vagina and makes this particular baby, that is the system of governance. It's just like, what if that, because, you know, sometimes, you know, biology is not perfect, right? Sometimes people with uteruses, the uteruses can't give birth for whatever reason at different times. Just maybe there's just a problem, right? Maybe that sperm doesn't work. You know, this is things that happen, right? This is the thing that happens in several different cases in the Game of Thrones. In House of the Dragon, right? What do you do sometimes you end up being forced to marry for political reasons. You're a woman that marries a gay prince. That happens to Rhaenyra, and right, and so they even can't have children, even if they wanted to, because I mean he can't do it. So so then that leads to her, like Rhaenyra, that leads to her having children with she gets with one of her guards and makes heirs, because they have to have heirs. They have to have heirs so they can continue the house. And it's like, you know, they even this is not even a case of like, oh, she's just sleeping with the people in the castle. It's like she tried to have heirs with that other guy. She tried to have heirs with her official wedded husband, but he was gay. Well, it's like, well, why would you have a woman? Why would you have a straight woman or even a bi woman? Well, actually, she's not straight. Why would you have, or Emma Darcy, who plays Rhaenyra, is actually non-binary. So, but in the show, she's a woman. So why would you have a bi woman marry a gay man and then they can't have sex and make babies? If your system of governance is certain sperm and eggs are more better and more privileged and more powerful than others, right? This is it's just nonsense. It's ridiculous, and it's baked into, it's nonsense cooked up by patriarchy basically, and unjust rulers ultimately. And it's about controlling women's bodies, right? It's just why they still control the anti-abortion, contraception, and the conservatives, especially, who want to control exactly how white women, especially white women, pumping out as many babies as possible. Women were basically treated as property historically, even into the 20th century in the Western world. Like in the 1950s, 60s, women couldn't have bank accounts even, so they were property of their men. They were big, it's been total patriarchy for basically the whole time, and even now it's feigning at patriarchy, because even as Kamala runs for president, even as Hillary Clinton gains all this power, women are still paid less. Women are still underrepresented across the board in jobs, in pay, etc. So the system of that causes all these problems, where the people who so you have somebody who's gay but has to marry her because that is the politically expedient marriage that will work out for this system of governance, this nonsense system of governance called European feudalism. They can't have children, but they need children. So then we're gonna have another child, but the thing is, because her partner, who is forget what his name is, what was his name? Laenor, yeah, that's his name. Yeah, so Princess, like because she and Laenor, like these two guys, she and him, they can't make babies because he's gay, and it just doesn't work. They have to, so she ends up, having babies with the guard, but they are both Valyrian with silvery white hair, and the babies that she has are all very dark black hair, right? So nobody says it out loud, and this is a lot of season one. It's like nobody says it out loud, but it's like, all your kids are bastards. Eventually, somebody does say it very loudly out loud, and then Daemon cuts his head off, leaving only, he cuts off 80% of his head, leaving his lower jaw and his tongue flapping around. And he kills him. And I won't say who exactly, but it doesn't quite matter. But it's like, but it's kind of like, why does it? But it's like so much of the energy and so much of the Game of Thrones world and the European feudal world is just wrapped up in who exactly is doing it with who. And it's kind of like, I mean, just as I use as a counter example again, in Hawaii, like in Hawaiian culture, they would call him King Kamehameha, and they call him like they use words like king and queen and lord lady. But the Hawaiian system was not the European feudal system, and I went more into depth with this. In our Hawaiian system, the ruler, there were people that were like there were more like, the word is closer to steward, right? And in the Hawaiian system that governed, this is like an example of the traditional Hawaiian ahupua'a system of land management that kept the environment producing and not toxic and sustainable for thousands of years, in the same place, supporting 1 million people. And so the governance system, right, which was very egalitarian and very well functioning, high functioning when it was not under colonial degradation. But the system of governance was such that, well, number one, I was talking about economic inequality. So the masses were encouraged to. It was fundamentally what the West would call communistic, collectivistic, and they did call it that. the Native Americans had a similar system. They literally called it communistic. And so that there was no vast accumulations of power and wealth in any particular, anywhere, right? And the job of the steward, right, which is called sometimes it was kind of translated as king, but it's not really equivalent. The job of the ali, right, like Ka'ahumanu or Kamehameha, right, their job was to make sure that all the resources of the community were redistributed. So all the food, that's what a luau actually is. So all of the taro or the fish, right? We're talking about, right, in Game of Thrones, running out of food, and people in the streets calling for revolution, calling for the head, rising up against the ruler, right? In the Hawaiian system, the job of the steward was to take all the resources, so all the food, all the coconuts, all the fish, whatever it was, right? Take it all, bring it into one. It was brought into a place. This is what a luau is, and it was about mass redistribution to all of the people based upon their needs, right? So if you needed, and this is actually like still lived out in Hawaiian culture. Like in actual Hawaiian luau, the youngest people, the most able-bodied people, their job is to serve the eldest and the children first, right? Like my parents, my mom is she was raised and grew up in Hawaiian culture. Both my parents are Hawaiian, but we were just expected to do this, right? When you have a large gathering, the youngest and most able-bodied people are expected to feed all of the elderly. You bring the food to the elderly, to the infirm, to the sick, to the disabled, and to the young, right? To make sure that all those, especially the weakest and the most infirm and less able amongst the group, get everything that they need, so that nobody goes without. This is completely missing, right? Because in a luau in Waikiki, you have impoverished, sometimes going hungry workers, right? Pacific Islanders, Asians, people that are disregarded, the servants, right? The cooks, the maids, the cleaners in the modern Western capitalist system, which is a neo-feudal system, as I described in Neofeud, the video game. And so you have the poorest people who sometimes are going hungry. Hawaii has the highest poverty rates, the most economic inequality in the United States. And so the poorest are expected to serve the richest who can afford these fancy luau's. So it's actually an anti-luau, right? It's an absolute total perversion of culturally what a luau was about. A luau was a living embodiment of egalitarian, collectivistic, it's living socialism. The socialism of Hawaiian characters. It was where the economic and political structure was reaffirmed, which is to say that the elite, they gained respect because they gave everything away. Any leader, right? Like the house of Kalakaua, the house of this. If any leader who withheld, right, resources and didn't give it away, they would lose prestige. They would be seen as suspect, right? Because why are you holding on? Why are you hoarding resources, right? And whereas in the West, if you hoard and you increase capital, you become Elon, right? If you become more well respected, the richer and more powerful you could become a Roosevelt, right? Until the people go, give it back, until it gets extremely bad and people go, you have to give it back or we're going to cut all your heads off, right? But the Hawaiian system was such that nobody was allowed to, because Roosevelt's kept their wealth, by the way, right? It didn't go away, right? They didn't actually succeed at redistributing all the wealth. And today the United States has the greatest economic, and the Western capitalist world in the U.S. at the top of that has the greatest economic inequality, with a handful of billionaires owning as much wealth as the entire country combined, right? All the common folk having nothing. So the Hawaiian system was one in which the hoarding of power and resources above the population was controlled by not the luau system, but it was like the ahupua'a system, the maka'ainanas, the average people, like the power. There's a saying that in Hawaiian that the power flows from the land to the workers, to the people, the maka'ainana, the eyes and the face of the land. That's what that word translates to the king, right? The power doesn't flow from the king or the ali, the steward. The power does not flow from the leader, right, the head of state, to the people, from God or from the vagina of the right penis, the penis and the vagina going into the right place, making the pure whatever. It has nothing to do with the glory or the great conquest or the history books say great things about your daddy. It's nothing to do with that. The power flows from the land, which is without the land you have no people, right? So the environmental respect of the environment is baked in. That's why we didn't destroy our lands, unlike the West and the United States. That have all the wildfires and all the environmental degradation and destruction. Since they got here, they wrecked our entire Hawaiian Islands in less than 100 years. Watch the John Oliver show. And so that has a special on that. It's like the West going, oh my God, we screwed up. Anyway, so the power, it was understood that power flowed from the land to the people to the leaders. And also we didn't have a patriarchy in the sense that the women had as much or more power as the men. It's not always going to work perfectly, and you have to constantly. And when a local leader would decide that they wanted to hoard power, or make war, right? Do this war making thing, like as we talked about in Game of Thrones, right? If somebody decided what I want to do is, I want to get with all my buddies, right? And I want to start a whole bunch of wars for my own power and prestige, right? Those people would be checked by the other it was expected they would be checked by all the other stewards in that area that would put them back in line and say, no, we're not doing that. And in fact, you don't have the hoarded resources to sustain such a thing, because we're all supposed to be, that's it's kind of like, by not having hoarded resources, you don't have the coffers, right? The war coffers and the hoarding because to actually engage in a military conquest of any kind of significant scale, it takes withheld resources. That's part of Game of Thrones. It's like the city is going hungry because all the resources are going to feed the dragons. All the money and all the resources are going to the war machine. I'm sure the United States and the Europeans are not taking money and resources and giving it to war machines and the military now, right? That never happens, right? That would never happen. You ever heard of that? I've never heard of that. I'm sure everyone's doing really well in America right now, and everybody's super happy and they're well fed and definitely not moving to Russia and China because of how shitty the U.S. and the West has become. Anyways, I watched on YouTube, like, why I left. I'm an American. Why I live in China now. I was in Europe, and now I'm in Russia, and my God, my life is so much better. It's sad. Anyways, unfortunate. But no, who's making all the war, right? And so when you make a lot of war, like you want to fight Russia, you want to fight the Arab world and China at the same time. What? Anyways, but so part of the system. Let me finish that. So the environment. So not having the resources being hoarded, prevents the discontent, and it's just a value in the society, right? So it's a communistic society. The means of production is then redistributed. It's controlled by the workers, and if the elite is unjust, one of the ways of dealing with that was for the worker in Hawaii was the workers all leave the land and they go to neighboring vicinities, right? It was expected. This doesn't work in feudalism, in the European system, or in the Greek or Roman system. There's no freedom of the slaves, right, or the workers, right? They were all controlled. It was expected of the workers in Hawaii, who they were freely able to and expected to, right? The Makainana, they were expected to leave unjust lords, right? Unjust leaders, fiefs, right? And go to other ones in order to correct the hoarding that leader was doing, because it was basically a general strike, right? With no workers tending to the patches, right? With no farmers tending to the grain, with no fishermen catching the fish, with nobody building the rock walls, with nobody maintaining, right, the means of production on the land, then that unjust ruler would be checked by the economic collapse of his region, and then soon he would be replaced. That's actually so like Hawaii, the things that people are learning very late in the West. We already had that a long time ago, and I was like, there's a story of the Flying Tarot that is a mythological. It was a children's story, children's cartoon. It's like not a children's cartoon, but it was like what a Disney movie is, where this is entertaining animated animate plants. It was like a bee's. It was like a bug's life. These plants that fly and they escape the taro patch of a unjust leader who is eating too much and keeping everything for himself, right? And anyway, so I can get lost in this, so I keep going, so I better stop. But long story short, that's the fact that we have well established multi-centuries, if not millennia old stories, like the myth of the story of the flying kalo in Hawaiian culture, which is about the right of the common folk and the right and the duty of the common folk to control the would-be capitalist ruler kings, right, patriarchs, to control their leaders. And it is a man in this story, right? It's like the women don't do that generally, but sometimes the men might decide they want to have power, wealth, and make wars. So you got to check them. The workers, common average people, must leave, put the tools down, stop working, and reinforce the power of the working people, the common people. That is what gives the legitimacy of the ruler, or in this case in Hawaii, the steward, right, or the person that is in charge, right? So coming back to game in House of the Dragon, right? It's like there is no system for that. There has never been a system for that in Greece, or there was no recognition of that. In Greece, it was the common people they're just workers. They have no rights. If they rise up, they are to be rebellions of the working class in Greece were expected to be put down by massacres, right? Same thing in Rome, same thing in Europe, right? If the serfs rebelled against their lord, the lord would come to the king and say, "King, we're having problems here," and the king would generally put it down with massacres, or would sanction it, would say, "Well, that's what we have to do." Now they would try to no kill every single person because we're going to run out of workers, but making an example that shows that the order of things is that the Lord controls. The Lord controlled by the king, right? And in the Greek system, it's the hereditary, the oligarchs, the people in charge, the men, which are white Hellenic men, control their non-Hellenic workers and their women, right? Same thing in Rome, right? The Caesars control and through this hierarchy, their soldiers that are crushing and plundering, and then all of the underlings, all the people that work in the olive fields, those people, that's meaningless. It's irrelevant. You're not a Caesar. You're not of the right lineage. And if you rise up, it's massacres, right? There's not even a thought of like equality for the work. There's not even a thought of working class power. It's not even like a thought in anybody's mind, right? And nobody is allowed to even get literate to really explore that, especially not to read when there are books available. to think about alternate setups, right? And even in the current state of affairs, only very recently has the West even entered like this concepts of socialism and communism. Right? These are not necessarily, in responses to the capitalist system, right? These are accurate portrayals of what is wrong with them. But a lot of what Marx wrote about, and Kropotkin anarchists and Marxists wrote about, was basically taking from native people in other cultures, Native Americans specifically, and basically reforming that in recontextualizing that for consumption by European and Euro settlers, like in the United States. So anyways, but that's a bunch of aside. But then where does that intersect with? Why are you talking about that? I thought you were talking about birthing, right? Well, the system of governance in the European, I was trying to make a point about the feudalistic system, the European feudalism. The European feudalism, right? In which women's bodies are controlled so that the men who already have a capitalistic, it's not necessarily formally capitalistic, but it is hoarding of resources unjustly by a ruling class, right? That is the feudal lords and ladies. That is based upon this hereditary dynastic system. The thing is, the cap, it's incongruous and it's nonsensical, right? Because did the feudalism transmit? Did feudalism become capitalism or democracy? Because you can't really have If a capitalist system is able to convert all of the vast quantities of wealth and power into buying media and as Einstein said, buying school textbooks, history books, radio stations, news media, and the education system as a whole, then the people can't make a democratic and informed democratic decision under a capitalistic system. Right? I mean, that's Einstein. Nobody tells you that. Because they don't have an education system in the West, because it's capitalistic, because of what he just said, right? Anyway, I want so if the people under this system, right, they don't have the ability to change. They can only nobody chooses anything, right? Nobody chooses anything. The nobles just decide, oh, you're going to be in charge next. The aristocracy, the oligarchs, right? Which is technically that is the same as the Greek and the Roman system. The Greek and Roman democracies, these were a handful of aristocratic. Again, it was like they're like the lords of Greece and Rome. These so-called democracies the U.S. is based on. It was a handful of wealthy aristocratic oligarchs, like a boardroom. You know, it's like the boardroom discussions at Walmart Corporation, you know, or like at BlackRock, right? Those are the new lords and ladies. I mean, that's the point of Neofeud as well. There is a vote. It's a democracy in the sense that the boardroom has a vote. There's 10 super rich guys from different houses. They're all intermarrying with each other's wives that go to the same golf courses, just like in feudalism, right? Like Trump. There are Trumps that are married to Clintons, and that's why there's a Clinton Bush in Neofeud, and there's a Gates Walton in Neofeud, and there's a Koch Jobs, because Steve Jobs' children and the Koch family, they all, even though they're directly related, they all know each other. The CEO of MSNBC and the CEO of Fox, they're all good friends. They're all in the same family, and they make people they pretend like there's some kind of conflict in there. No, they're all in the capitalist plutocracy. They fight over how much money each one has, maybe, but they all have class solidarity as neo-feudal capitalist American plutocrats. So the people like and so people don't have any choice, and the birthright. So the women's bodies have to be controlled in the same in the Hawaiian as in the Hawaiian culture as well. It's recognized that the women need to have at least equal power, in part because it's part to rein in a toxic masculine world where the men's personal desires for prestige and power and wealth and eventually war, right? Testosterone fueled war that can supersede the needs of the people. That has to be checked by strong women and also the third gender. That's Mahu, which is what I am, by the way. Presence. We also had full acceptance of all of that and gender fluidity, and there's no. And who exact and so the women's part. So women's bodies were not controlled in Hawaiian culture, and in the descendant. I don't have time to do this, but I'm so lost. But who became the inheritor in Hawaiian culture as opposed to European feudal culture? Right? It was not determined. I'm trying to find Emma. Like as an example, right? Emma Kaleleao Nalani Na'ea Rook, that's seen here, right? She did not become a leader in Hawaii as Queen Emma because the right penis and the right vagina had sex, right? She was born and then she was hanai. She was adopted. She was raised by someone that she wasn't biologically related to, and this was totally accepted and normal, right? If you didn't want to have children as a woman in Hawaii, if you didn't want to have children, you were not required to. If you were born with, if you were born with a womb, et cetera, but you felt like you were a man, you simply went about your life in the kane, is the Hawaiian word. You went about your life as a man. Right? So gender fluidity and conceptions of gender, right, were acknowledged that they were not. It was a spectrum, and it was not a hard. You were born either as a man or a woman, and it's determined immediately, and everybody knows it, and it's very clear, which is what the West still can't get past. They can barely get past it even now. So as a Hawaiian, like people, if you identify as a man or you identify as a woman, that was your choice, and people didn't like get into your personal business. Similar in China, by the way. Was that Jackson Hinkle in the last week was like, China has no trans people on TV. It's like the biggest star in China. The Oprah of China is literally a trans woman. Everybody knows it. They don't get the culture is just that we just let people be who they want to be, and we don't cause big kerfuffles about it because that's silly and that would be oppressive to people, and it's not doesn't make any sense. We have other things to concern ourselves with, like the Chinese are concerned like stopping warfare and encroachment and imperialism, dealing with diseases, dealing with including COVID, dealing with future, making sure that people have food in the future. They're building huge AI, using actual useful AI to make AI powered farms, vertical farms to increase food production. I mean that's what they're concerned about. Renewable technology, climate change. We're not concerned about what's in people's pants, like J.K. Rowling and most of the Western world. In a really bad way, like at the Olympics, accusing Algerian boxers and Chinese boxers of not being the right gender. I mean, who's the people that are really worried about that? Who's been thinking about weaponizing that kind of stuff? It's Westerners, right? Anyway, in Hawaii, it was similar. It was like, if you're a man, just be a man. If you're a woman, just be a woman. If you're born with different body parts, but I really feel like I'm not. If you're born with the, with the what you would be considered male body parts, but I feel like I'm not that. I'm a third gender person. I'm not man or woman. I'm a mahu, right? Then just be that. Now, but then there are expectations of you, like you have to perform your duties as that gender, right? And anyway, and so, but in the biological, in the West, like the woman's, and if you were a woman, also as a Hawaiian woman, you were not required to simply pump out heirs, because giving birth to children is the decision of women. Hawaiians also understood, like many other cultures, that some women's bodies simply don't produce babies for whatever reason. Something was mishappened in the development of the womb. Who knows, right? In a Western culture, right? If you can't give birth to children as a woman, it is a personal moral failing, right? And it presently, and also definitely historically, right? In the European history, if you can't give, it's in this show. When a woman fails to give birth to a healthy heir, she's like, I'm so sorry. She's asking for repentance, and all the men are like looking at her like, oh my God, what a disgrace, Napoleon, right? Joaquin Phoenix in Napoleon, and this is based on actual history. He became increasingly upset that France could fall apart politically because you, wife, you are failing to give me male heirs. Right? It's absolute nonsense. I mean, it's like a woman doesn't choose what gender the woman doesn't send a message down into the uterus, or the person with a womb doesn't send a message to the uterus and go make it a boy. That's not in her control. She can't control whether the body works. It's like if a guy can't piss because he has like an enlarged prostate, everybody, it's not like, oh my God, what a moral failing that your prostate is so enlarged. If a guy goes around and has sex with all these women, and it's implied in the world, like the men can have sex with as many women as they want, and nothing comes back to them. Right? They can cheat all they want, they can do whatever they want, but if the woman is impure, it's she has all these repercussions, and she failed her gender, she failed her womanhood, she failed the society, she failed the country. It's just absolutely nonsense. And you'd be like, well, that's just how it is. No, that's not how it is. That's how Europe is. That's how the West is, right? And because again, like where's the picture? I keep on losing it. Yeah. So Emma, like what? So her mother was not forced to give birth to women, right? Emma, in Hawaiian culture, Emma's mother was not forced to give birth to children. The woman who raised her mother, right, was unable to have children. That wasn't a personal failing of hers. That was simply nature, right? And Hawaiians understood that. People in Hawaii culture, so women have the choice If they want to have children, have children. If they don't want to have children, you don't have to have children. If you biologically can have children because something is malfunctioning in your uterus, that's not your fault. That's not a problem. Women in Hawaiian culture were free. Like another one is Ka'ahu Manu. Because of this, right? Ka'ahu Manu was famously, right? The white European missionaries, when they came to Hawaii, they hated Ka'ahu Manu because A, she had great power as a woman in Hawaii, and they saw this as horrible. B, she had multiple partners, and Hawaiian women could have multiple male partners. They could have multiple women partners, right? Just like the men can go in Game of Thrones and in European history, men can go philander all they want, but women have to be pure. In Hawaiian culture, women and men both, they can have the partners that they want to have. It is irrelevant. It's which is so there's actual gender sexual equality and also gender equality in Hawaiian culture, in our historical Hawaiian culture. It is not a moral failing if a woman has a child that is not of her husband's. We didn't have this weird men purchasing women for fucking sheep culture like in the U.S. and the West and Europe. That doesn't exist, right? So men and women can have whatever relations they want. Women that don't want to have relations, they don't have to have relations, right? And men, if they don't want, right? It's not like the duty of the woman to pop out heirs, right? So there's like women. What is JD Vance? What is JD Vance's whole freaking thing? You have the United States is like in an uproar because you have the United States. JD Vance is like, women, you have to pop out babies. If you don't take all your sperm and pop out tons of babies, and he's like waving his people are like, how the United States is like waving jars of sperm around, right? They're like, I can make babies. We're making babies. My wife is making babies. We're making so many American babies, and that's why we're gonna win. Because look at how much sperm I'm getting and putting in me. I'm making all these babies, right? This is just, to this very day, this patriarchal notions of, we need mass procreation of particular people. Now it's like more white people, obviously. This one and get our numbers up, get our white American numbers up, especially for the conservatives, the white male party, and then get the American numbers up in general. It's just Elon Musk is all on this, right? We have to have all the babies we possibly can, forcing as many women to give birth as possible. But this is the control over women's bodies, control over people with uteruses bodies, right? Is a historical Western thing that many of them think that this is the historical norm, right? And this is why a lot of progressive people in the West, they come to indigenous, like Ursula K. Le Guin, right? Her father was an anthropologist who was studying indigenous culture. It's another one, right? Ursula K. Le Guin is like well renowned as like such a great progressive, like moving progressive on gender and race and colonialism and all this stuff in science fiction, and it's not false, right? But like Marx, right? A lot of it was just studying indigenous non-Western people, and just going, well, this Native American culture has gender fluidity. They have like third genders. They have queer acceptance, right? Right? And then you have like left hand of darkness, and you have like the Earth Sea. But that like Marx, that's just taking Native Hawaiian, Native American, non-Western, indigenous, and even Asian and African cultures, and then just like importing it and going like, look at this thing, and everybody's like, wow, you're revolutionary and groundbreaking, right? But it's like, no, like, I don't know what to tell you. It's just like stuff got screwed up in this sad part of Eurasia called the West. It's like the part like north of the Mediterranean, in like west of Russia. I'm sorry, it missed a lot of memos. Anyways, so the women were women in Hawaiian culture could have whatever relations they wanted. They were not expected to give birth. If they didn't produce, there was no such thing as producing heirs. Who your parents were was not who biologically gave birth to you, right? So you couldn't have the problem, right? You couldn't have the problem of having a gay prince, right? Because if your partner was gay and didn't want to, you wouldn't have forced marriages for political expediency. If you were with if you were, I don't know, in the household with somebody, right, and you couldn't have children, right, you could, you would just, it would be, well, here somebody else who is able to have children, you can raise that child, right? And who raised you? So this would never have happened. So who raised you is that was really who was thought of as, that is who your real parent, that's who your makua is, right? Who raised you, who made you who you are, right? It's of course, right? If you are born in Sweden, right, but you were raised 100% in California, in Los Angeles, right? You're gonna speak a Los Angeles accent, and you had no idea who your parents were. You're gonna be a Los Angelesan American person. You're not gonna be a Swedish person, right? And there's certain things, DNA is handed out, but for all intents and purposes, that's gonna make the most of a difference of who you are, what you think, your political ideology, your language, your values, that kind of stuff is all gonna be, Anyway, so long story short. And and so who it nurtures you is who in Hawaiian culture, that was to be who would be your parent, not who biologically popped you out. Anyways, I gotta go, so I can't spend forever on this. But also, in several of the birthing scenes in House of the Dragon, the women are dying frequently because of backward European medical practices, and there is a black it's implied non-European doctor who. There's a king who is getting leeches and being bloodlet routinely, right? King, who he ends up dying from his Western iatrogenics, or the healer harming the patient, right? Which is in the history in the West. The Western doctors have killed more patients than they saved for virtually all of the history, including to the present, especially with fentanyl, opioids, and lack of COVID. Education and proper governmental, society, civilizational education and management. Anyway, so historically, so the king ends up, but the non-Western person is like, we could use cauterization, we could use medicinal herbs, right? And but the white doctor is like, no, bloodletting and leeches. It's comforting to him. And anyway, so there's a whole topic on empiricism and the lack of science in the West, because there were empiricists in West Asia, in the Levant region, in what's Palestine, Syria, North Africans, in Islam, and the Muslim, the Gaza, where Gaza comes from. They actually had empirical science for medicine. That's how part of how they had better medicine. Right? And they had hospitals. But in the modern era, Hawaii was the first universal healthcare system. But in the 1100s, 1200s, in the golden age of Islam, right, they had Bimiristan, basically free healthcare for all people, in the Arab world. It was actually it was in the Quran itself, and women, men, any religion, any race, everyone was expected to be served no matter what, with help by the hospitals. And so they had the world's best hospital system there. The world's first hospital system, actually, and universities also came from the Arab world, as well. And so the Maester in the Game of Thrones is implied that he's from somewhere else, right? And he's like, you could use these actual herbs that heal people from wounds and these horrible ailments, but the European is like, no, I think cutting people's, when people have if people have like extreme sores on their body, cutting their wrists open and bleeding them out, that's gonna help. I mean, you could discover, and part of it is you could discover that doesn't work, but you would have to do actual science, or you have to do empirical testing. Okay, cut 10 patients open, put this herb on 10 patients, and then record, right, what works and what doesn't, right? But that's not what they did. They tended towards patriarchal, unjust hierarchical theoreticians, or whatever the theory was. Basically, whatever somebody said, whether it was Aristotle, or whether it was Aristotle, or whatever was the high priest of the church, or whatever is whatever European powerful academic said at the time. It doesn't matter what the empirical knowledge was, what the data said, what the historical recording said. Whatever they said was true, right? And Galileo was obviously famously imprisoned for pointing out the fact that the Earth is not the center,
according to mathematical calculations, it is the sun that is the center of the system, and all the celestial body, the heavenly bodies revolve around it. And then they said no, because that could jeopardize Catholic European power and living here. Anyway, long story short, so I gotta cut off because it's already 2. But I really like House of the Dragon. Maybe I'll do a second video on this. There's so much to talk about. Possibly, I'm still finishing it out. And the patriarchal tendencies towards war. Versus the women that are trying to they prioritize preserving their communities, preserving their families, preserving the lives of their children. Right? I mean, it's just a thing. It's just, whatever, estrogen versus testosterone. I mean, it's biologically, historically, culturally, it's all those things together. But the expectations and the norms in the society are impacted by this. But the women are concerned about maintaining stability and erring on the side of not going to violence and going to war. And when they do go to war, the women lose. They are all kicked out of they lose more and more power, and they are less and less involved in the affairs, which only increases the violence. And that kind of you can see the feedback loop of a patriarchy engaging in violence, which increases the violence, each side seeking more retaliation as the men remove the voices of reason from control in their society on the decisions on the day-to-day basis. Then it increases the violence, which increases the suffering, which increases the economic suffering, increases the death from the military conflict. The world becomes more chaotic and more on fire. The dragons get loose, right? The bigger and bigger weapons get used. More and more escalations happen. More and more grudges emerge, and things get more and more out of control. And that's like part of the. And so you see the wisdom of the previous, not so doodly dude, not so patriarchal, not so manly man Viserys, who is like he says, I am a seer, I am not a dragon, right? The dragons in the Targaryens are like the ones who are like, warriors, the ones like Daemon, right? They're warriors, they're fighters, they're killers. They rule by wrath and by fear and by fire, right? And he's like, I'm and then there's the visionaries, and it's like we have dreams and we can see what will happen in the future, and we try to prevent catastrophes from happening, which is what he is trying to do. He's trying to maintain the peace so that the war that does eventually break out doesn't happen. He's been trying to. He succeeded in his lifetime at preventing the future catastrophic events from happening, as his father did, right? And so then you can see that is also those fail events, eventually enough miscalculations get made after he is gone as well, that catastrophic events do break out. The House of the Dragon does get split in half. It does get divided, right? At the end of season 1, he's like, we are family. We must come together. We must make peace. We must make peace, right? It's kind of like at the end. And like only in season 2, you go like, because this is what happens when you don't make peace. Then everyone suffers and everyone dies. And some people think it's going to be the greatest, coolest, awesomest thing ever to go to war, right? And only after everyone has suffered and died and everything is lost and there's a kingdom of ashes, as the women are going, what horror is being visited being visited upon our families and our children. Only then is it, oh my God, we should have listened to reason, and we should have made peace earlier, and we should not be in this war. And I hope this war will end. And because the thing is, wars can destroy entire bloodlines, entire peoples, entire towns wiped out, just gone, and it is true. And so like that's I'm getting increasingly bad at completing my sentences properly as I rush and head towards starvation and lunchtime, so I better just end. So don't forget, everything we do here is supported by the you can give us direct support to Ko-Fi at ko-fi.com /silverspook. You can also help us out at patreon.com/neofeud for ongoing support. And you can also help us to keep on doing this work at Silverspook video making, Silverspook streaming, indigenous, anti-colonial, anti-capitalist education, as well as making cyberpunk, sci-fi, and another kind of cyberpunk, Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon inspired games like Neofeud 2, which is here's some screenshots of that. I don't have any royal shots right now, but I am working on the royalty sections of Neofeud 2. You can also get Neofeud 1 and support everything we do here. I have to finish Neofeud 2 in 1 week. I gotta get back to work. After this, I'm working again. After I'm done streaming, I'm at work while I'm streaming. I'm gonna do 2 jobs at once. I'm gonna finish Neofeud 2. You know, like a good common folk. I'm gonna finish Neofeud 2. I'm gonna get through my Makainana common folk work in 1 week, and I'm also gonna stream at the same time in this afternoon on the Twitch stream. So you can check that out on Twitch. And also, of course, don't forget, you can grab Neofeud 1, which is a game I spent 2.5 years working on, the writing, music, art, and programming, which is a dystopic cyberpunk adventure game with a Game of Thrones like intrigue. House of the Dragon. I'm gonna change to House of the Dragon like political intrigue and machinations overlaid over the cyberpunk universe. And also, of course, it does help if you like Neofeud, don't forget to leave even a very short review on Steam, because it does help get the game discovered in the algorithm. You can also get Neofeud on itch.io for Windows and for Mac and Linux on the itch.io website. It's also a game that is on sale there. And it is a game that is on sale there. And it's also maximum revenue comes to us when you buy it there. And you don't need to have Steam if you don't want to use that. Then there's several other games to get there. And Woman is a book by Holly, who was raised in right-wing evangelical Protestant Christianity. And it is a book that Holly wrote that you can get for free, and or donate some money to us when you pick it up on itch. You can also follow at silverspookgames at octagon.social, at silverspookgames at mastodon.social, and of course you can also follow on Twitter at silverspookguy, silverspookgames for the games related stuff. And I got too many tabs. This is the first time in a long time I have like 50 quadzillion. I have 50 dragonillion tabs open, and what that means is that's like as many the number dragonillion denotes how many huts a dragon can set on fire in a single breath. Actually, that's probably not that much, because I don't know how many huts are in the average village. But anyways, you can follow at silverspookguy at silverspookgames minus the Ian Silver. You can also follow Terminus C, which is a cyberpunk RPG. I'm the content director and lead writer for Terminus Cyberstar. And of course, you can also follow Holly at the Tech Fairy, at Allergic to Blue, is of course writer, producer, moderator here, married to myself, Lineback at Free Hawaii, and yes, is also sharing this important PSA of public health. Please mask up so that we can keep our people safe. Also, just randomly, I call this image, do androids dream in nightmare sheep? There's an android in the butt. Anyway, totally random way to leave you. I apologize. Thank you to all these lists of people. You're really awesome. Without your support, it's hard for us to keep doing this work. So thank you so much to all of our really cool, awesome Patreon patrons. And don't forget, check out your House of the Dragon. I hope we get another season of that. Until next time, keep your dragon shades polished, be excellent to each other, and we'll see you next time.